Think about your day, your phone, that coffee you're drinking, the clothes you're wearing. Chances are they've all crossed an ocean to get to you. Global trade is just, well, it's a part of modern life. But have you ever really stopped to ask why it works the way it does? And more specifically, why would a country that's amazing at making everything still bother to buy things from other countries? It seems to defy logic, right? Well, let's dive in and figure it out.
So, when you look at this incredible, complex web of global commerce, it's not just some chaotic marketplace. It's actually built on some really powerful and sometimes deeply surprising economic ideas that have been evolving for centuries. And that right there, that brings us to the central puzzle we're going to solve today. This is a question that stumped economists for a long time. It makes perfect sense to trade when you're good at making one thing and another country's good at something else. But what happens when one country is just better at making everything? Why on earth would it ever need to import anything? To solve this, we've got to unpack a few big ideas.
So, our journey to get to the bottom of this puzzle, it starts by looking way back at the very first major theory of international trade, an idea that's old and, as we're about to see, deeply flawed.
Okay, so for about 300 years, think the 1500s to the 1800s, economic thinking in Europe was completely dominated by this idea called mercantilism. And it viewed trade not as a collaboration, but as a straight-up battle.
The core idea here was really simple. Wealth is finite. To the mercantilists, the world's wealth was like a big pie, and you measured your slice by how much gold and silver you had piled up. So if your nation wanted a bigger slice, well, another nation had to get a smaller one. It was a classic zero-sum game.
So, let's say you're a mercantilist king. What's your strategy? It's a really simple three-step playbook. First, you sell as much stuff as you possibly can to other countries. That's maximizing exports. Second, you buy as little as you can get away with from them. That's minimizing imports. And the goal? Well, the goal is to make them pay you the difference in cold, hard gold, growing your nation's treasure chest.
And this quote just captures the whole spirit of it, right? This win-lose mentality meant that trade was basically a form of economic warfare. But this entire way of looking at the world, it was about to get turned completely on its head.
Enter Adam Smith. In 1776, he drops his book, The Wealth of Nations, and it's a bombshell. He proposes this revolutionary idea. What if the pie isn't fixed? What if trade isn't a zero-sum game at all, but could actually be a win-win for everybody involved? Smith's huge idea was called absolute advantage, and he argued that we can actually create more wealth for everyone through specialization. The logic is actually pretty straightforward. If your country can make something using less labor, more efficiently than anyone else, then you have an absolute advantage. You should focus on making that and then just trade for everything else.
Okay, let's make this real. Look at this classic example, the US and the UK making wine and cloth. As you can see in the table, the US is way more efficient at making cloth. We're talking 20 yards per hour versus the UK's 10. So the US has the absolute advantage in cloth. But look at the wine column. The roles are reversed. The UK can pump out 15 bottles in an hour, while the US only makes 5. The UK has the absolute advantage in wine.
So here's the magic. If the US goes all in on making cloth and the UK goes all in on making wine, and then they trade with each other, the total world output of both goods goes up. They don't just swap what they already have, they literally create more wealth for everybody. It's a true win-win, and it completely shatters that old mercantilist view. Now, Smith's idea was brilliant, no question, but it left one huge question just hanging there. A few decades later, another great economist, David Ricardo, he decides to tackle that final, most confusing piece of the puzzle, the one we started with. And this is the big one. What happens if one country is just flat out more productive, more efficient at making everything? According to Smith's theory, there'd be no reason for them to trade. But Ricardo, he had a hunch that couldn't be right. And this table just illustrates the paradox perfectly. Just look at this. A US worker can make 40 bottles of wine or 40 yards of cloth in an hour. Now look at the UK worker. Only 20 bottles of wine or 10 yards of cloth. The US clearly has an absolute advantage in both. So why on God's green earth should it trade with the UK?
Ricardo's genius was realizing that the answer isn't about being the absolute best, it's all about what you give up to do something. Think about it like this. A world-class chef might also be the fastest dishwasher in the entire kitchen, way faster than their assistant. But every single minute that chef spends washing dishes is a minute they are not creating a 5-star meal. The chef's time is just better spent cooking.
And that right there is the heart of comparative advantage.
It's not about who's most productive. It's about who has the lowest opportunity cost, who gives up the least to produce something. Nations should specialize where their efficiency advantage is the greatest, or, get this, where their disadvantage is the smallest.
This slide just makes the difference crystal clear. Absolute advantage, on the left, just asks who's better at this. And in our example, the answer is the US at both. Simple. But comparative advantage asks a much, much smarter question. Who gives up less to make this? Think about it. The US is 4 times more efficient in making cloth, but only twice as efficient in making wine. Its advantage is relatively bigger in cloth, which means the UK is relatively less bad at making wine. So, the US specializes in cloth and the UK specializes in wine. And that is the counterintuitive logic that unlocks the benefits of trade for everyone. It's brilliant.
Okay, so this is a fascinating little piece of economic history, right? But why is this 200-year-old idea from Ricardo still the bedrock of pretty much all modern trade theory? Well, because its implications are absolutely enormous.
The biggest takeaway is this. By specializing based on comparative advantage and then trading, countries can actually consume more than they could ever produce on their own. It's like, imagine a line that shows the maximum amount of stuff a country can make. Trade creates a whole new line, way further out, representing all the new combinations of goods that are now available to its people. It literally expands a nation's possibilities and boosts its standard of living.
And this incredibly powerful benefit, it has a name, the gains from trade. It's the fundamental reason why basically all economists agree that open trade, based on this idea, ultimately makes nations wealthier.
But the benefits don't even stop there. Beyond just having more stuff right now, trade creates what economists call dynamic games. It forces your domestic companies to compete on a global stage, which spurs innovation. It allows businesses to achieve massive economies of scale by selling to a global market. And all of this fosters long-term growth, and maybe most importantly for us, it drives down prices for consumers.
So, we've gone from mercantilism's win-lose battle to Ricardo's elegant win-win logic. The theory of trade really shows that prosperity so often comes from cooperation, not from isolation. But here's the thing. Comparative advantage isn't set in stone. It's always shifting with technology, with education, with investment, which leaves us with one last thought. In a world of AI, automation, and digital services, who's going to have the comparative advantage tomorrow, and in what?